AITA for suing my ex to get my ring back after she called off our wedding? I'm a 31-year-old, a custom furniture maker in Nashville. I started my business 6 years ago after apprenticing with an old craftsman who taught me everything about woodworking. Handmade dovetail joints, traditional joinery, with selection based on decades of experience. Now I run my own shop with 2 employees, making high-end custom pieces for clients who value quality over mass-produced junk. The work is steady, it pays well, and I own all my equipment outright. No loans, no debt, except for the mortgage. I have a small house in East Nashville that I bought 3 years ago, 2 bedrooms, a detached garage that I converted into my personal workshop. The neighborhood is gentrifying fast, so the property value keeps climbing. A smart investment, according to my accountant. I'm not rich by any means, but I'm comfortable. I drive a paid-off truck, keep my expenses low, and save aggressively. My dad lost everything in a bad business partnership when I was a kid, so I learned early on that financial security doesn't happen by accident. It's built brick by brick, and you protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. My life was exactly how I wanted it. A job I loved, financial stability, good friends, and what I thought was a solid relationship headed for marriage. That's where Caroline comes in. I met Caroline, 26, 2 years ago at a friend's wedding. She was a bridesmaid. I was a groomsman. The classic setup, except it actually worked. She was finishing her degree in graphic design and working part-time at a downtown boutique. Pretty, ambitious, with an energy that made even boring things interesting. Our first date turned into one of those all-night conversations where you lose track of time. She seemed genuinely interested in my work. She asked smart questions about the craft. She wanted to see pictures of my projects. Most people's eyes glaze over when I start talking about wood grain and joinery techniques. But Caroline got it, or at least she pretended to, which was enough. The relationship moved fast. Within 6 months, she was spending most nights at my place. Within a year, she had practically moved in, though she kept her apartment as a studio for her design work. I didn't mind. I liked having her around, and the house felt less empty with someone else in it. Looking back, there were little signs I chose to ignore. She had expensive taste, but a student budget, which meant I ended up paying for most of our dates, food, and entertainment. When I'd suggest cooking at home to save money, she'd pout and say she wanted to live life while she was young. I'd give in and take her to whatever trendy restaurant she'd seen on social media. Her friends were a certain type, the kind who measure success in Instagram followers and designer labels. They'd come over and make comments about my house being cozy in that tone that really means small. One of them even asked if I planned to upgrade once we were married, as if my home were a starter model I was going to outgrow. Caroline would laugh it off, but never defended me or the life I'd built. That should have told me something. She also had a habit of comparing us to other couples. Mallory's boyfriend surprised her with a trip to New York, she'd say, or Taryn's engagement ring is 2 carats. It was never a direct criticism, just little observations that made me feel like I was always coming up short. But she was beautiful, fun when she wanted to be, and I convinced myself that all relationships have rough patches. Plus, all her friends were getting engaged, and she started dropping hints that she was ready for that next step. The pressure was subtle but constant. In our second year, I proposed. I did everything the traditional way. I asked her father's permission. I planned a fancy dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date. I got down on one knee with a ring that cost me $12,000. That ring was a major purchase for me. 3 months of careful saving, researching diamonds and settings, and working with a jeweler I trusted. It was a 1.5 carat princess-cut diamond on a platinum band. The kind of ring that says, "I'm serious about building a future with you." The jeweler was an older guy who'd been in the business for 30 years. He walked me through the 4 Cs: cut, clarity, color, and carat, and helped me understand what I was paying for. We looked at dozens of options before finding the right one. He even sized it perfectly using a ring of Caroline's that I'd secretly borrowed. When I picked it up, he put it in a velvet box and said, "Whoever she is, she's a lucky woman." I remember thinking I was the lucky one. She cried when I proposed. She said yes immediately. She posted 17 pictures on social media in under an hour. Her friends went crazy in the comments. For a few weeks, we were that couple everyone envied. The wedding was set for October. We picked a venue in the Smoky Mountains, booked a photographer, and hired a caterer. The deposits alone cost me $8,500. Caroline wanted everything to be perfect, and I wanted her to be happy, so I paid for most of it. She was still in school and working part-time, so her financial contribution was minimal. At the time, I didn't care. I was the one with the steady income, and it felt right to invest in our future. The process of choosing the venue was exhausting. We looked at 12 different places in 2 months. Caroline would fall in love with one. I'd put down a deposit to hold the date, and then she'd change her mind after seeing something on Pinterest. The first place, I lost a $500 deposit because she decided it wasn't rustic enough. The second one was too rustic. We finally settled on a mountain lodge that cost more than the first two combined. The photographer was another saga. Caroline insisted on an award-winning photographer whose work she'd been following for months. She charged $3,500 for the wedding package, plus travel expenses because she was based in Atlanta. I managed to negotiate her down to $3,200, thinking I was being financially responsible. Caroline didn't even thank me. She was annoyed that I'd haggled over something so special. Every decision became a drama. The flowers, the centerpieces, the invitations, the style of chairs at the reception. She'd spend hours scrolling through wedding blogs and showing me options that all looked the same to me. When I'd say, "They all look great, you pick," she'd get upset that I wasn't invested in the process. The menu tasting took up an entire Saturday. We tried 7 main courses for salad options and debated for 2 hours whether the service should be plated or buffet style. I honestly didn't care. Food is food. But Caroline treated it like we were making life or death decisions. Her parents paid for the rehearsal dinner and her dress. My contribution covered basically everything else: venue, catering, photographer, flowers, music, and the honeymoon. We planned a week in Costa Rica, already paid for, another $4,200. The Costa Rica booking happened because Caroline saw an influencer post about a resort there. She sent me the link with heart emojis and said it had to be our honeymoon. The resort was all-inclusive but pricey, $600 a night for 7 nights plus flights. I booked it anyway because making her happy felt worth it. Or so I thought. The invitations went out in June. That's when things started to feel weird. Caroline became distant. She started spending more time at her studio apartment, saying she needed space to focus on her final projects for school. Fair enough. Graduation was coming up, and I know academic stress is real. I gave her space and kept working. I figured once she graduated and the wedding was closer, she'd be more present. Then, one night in late July, she came over with a serious look on her face. We sat on my couch, the one I built myself from reclaimed barn wood, and she dropped the bomb. "I need to talk to you about something," she said, not looking me in the eye. The tone said it all. This wasn't a conversation about centerpiece colors. "What's up?" I asked, already feeling my stomach drop. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, the wedding, everything," she said, twisting the engagement ring on her finger. "And I think we're moving too fast." "Too fast, Caroline? We've been together for 2 years, engaged for 6 months. I know, but I'm only 26. I haven't really lived yet. I went from college right into this relationship, and now we're getting married. I feel like I'm missing out on something." I just sat there, processing. "What are you saying?" "I think we should call off the wedding." The words just hung in the air like smoke. Call off the wedding. 2 months before the date, after all the deposits, the planning, and the invitations already sent. "You want to postpone it?" I asked, hoping that's what she meant. "No, I want to cancel it. I'm too young to be tied down. I need time to figure out who I am before I commit to spending my life with someone." Too young to be tied down, as if I were a prison sentence instead of the man who'd supported her through college, paid most of our bills, and invested everything into building a future together. "This is really sudden," I said, trying to stay calm. "Where is all this coming from?" Her voice had a rehearsed quality to it. "I've been thinking about it for months. Every time I look at wedding stuff, I feel anxious, like I'm giving up my youth before I've even lived it. And why didn't you say anything sooner? Before the invitations went out, before I paid thousands of dollars in deposits. I thought the feeling would go away, but it hasn't. It's only gotten stronger. Months. That word stuck with me. You've been feeling this way for months, and you're just telling me now?" I didn't want to worry you. I thought maybe it was just normal wedding jitters. "Wedding jitters don't last for months, Caroline. That's called doubt. That's called having second thoughts. Normal people communicate those things to their partner. She got defensive. I'm communicating it now. After I spent $12,000 on a ring? After I planned our entire future around you? After I told my family, my friends, and my clients that I was getting married in October? I'm sorry about the timing, but there's never a good time for this conversation. Yes, there was a good time. It was months ago when you started feeling this way, or before I paid for the venue deposit, or before we had the invitations printed. Any of those times would have been better than 2 months before the wedding. She started to cry. Why are you making this about money? This is about our relationship, about my feelings, and all you care about are the deposits. I care that you lied to me for months while I was spending money that we both knew was non-refundable. I didn't lie. I just didn't know how to tell you. It's the same thing, Caroline. You knew how you felt. You chose not to tell me. That's lying by omission. I felt like I was in a nightmare. So that's it. We're just done. I'm sorry. I know this is hard, but I have to be honest about how I feel. Honest. When she'd been hiding the truth for months while I paid for a wedding she apparently never wanted. Okay, I said finally. If that's how you feel, then it's over. She looked relieved, which made it even worse, like she'd expected me to beg or argue. Instead, I accepted the situation and moved on to the practical. I'll start canceling things tomorrow, I continued. You should get your stuff out of here by the end of the week. That's when she held up her hand, showing the ring. By the way, I'm keeping this. I stared at her. What? The ring was a gift. I'm keeping it. Caroline, that ring cost $12,000. You're calling off the wedding. You have to give it back. No, you gave it to me. It's mine now. The sense of entitlement was staggering. She was ending the engagement, but still believed she deserved to keep a ring that represented a promise she was breaking. That ring was a conditional gift, I said, keeping my voice steady. The condition was marriage. No marriage, no ring. That's not how it works. Once you give someone a gift, it's theirs. I looked it up. She had looked it up. That meant she'd been planning this for a while and had already researched how to keep the ring when she dropped the final blow. Give me the ring, Caroline. No, I'm keeping it. I stood up. Get your things and get out. Fine, but I'm taking the ring. She was gone that night, and I was left in my empty house trying to process what had just happened. My fiancé had ended our engagement, kept the ring, and left me with thousands of dollars in wedding expenses. But I wasn't about to let it go. The next morning, I called my friend Grant. He's a lawyer. He mostly handles small business contracts, but he knows people. I explained the situation and asked what my options were. In Tennessee, engagement rings are considered conditional gifts, he told me. If the recipient of the ring breaks off the engagement, she is legally obligated to return it. You have a solid case. And the emotional damages? That's trickier. You'd have to prove she acted in bad faith or caused you significant financial harm through deception. She did. I thought about the months of her pretending everything was fine while she planned her exit. The timing of it all, late enough that I'd already paid most of the deposits. The premeditated research on how to keep the ring. Yeah, I said, she did. Then let's build the case. Over the next week, I documented everything. Every deposit receipt, every text message about wedding planning, every email with vendors. I calculated my total financial losses. Venue deposit, caterer, photographer, flowers, honeymoon, $12,700 in non-refundable expenses. Add in the $12,000 ring, and we were talking about nearly $25,000. The documentation process was meticulous. I created a spreadsheet with every expense, organized by date and category. Each entry included the vendor's name, the amount paid, the date, and whether Caroline had been consulted on or approved the expense. I found texts from April where she had written, "Yes, book him," about the photographer. Emails from May where she said the venue was absolutely perfect and we should lock it down immediately. Messages from June where she helped me write the check for the catering deposit, telling me how excited she was about the menu we'd chosen. Every piece of evidence showed a woman who was fully engaged in wedding planning, enthusiastically approving expenses and giving no indication that she wanted out. Meanwhile, by her own admission, she'd been having doubts since May or June. I also looked through our joint bank account history and found dozens of transactions where I'd covered her expenses, groceries, gas, her share of utilities, even her car insurance when she was short 1 month. Over 2 years, I had probably subsidized her life to the tune of an extra $15,000. But I wanted more than just the ring back. I wanted compensation for being led on while she planned her exit, costing me time and money I'd never get back. I went through our messages and found something interesting. In mid-June, she'd texted her friend Mallory. I knew because Mallory had once accidentally texted me thinking I was Caroline, so her number was saved in my phone. The conversation was visible on our shared cloud backup before she'd removed my access. Caroline had written, "Still having doubts, but the deposits are already paid, so might as well see how I feel closer to the date." See how I feel. As if our wedding were a movie she was on the fence about seeing. And that was mid-June, 5 weeks before she finally told me. Grant put me in touch with Victor, a lawyer who specialized in civil cases, including broken engagements. Victor reviewed everything and nodded. "This is solid. She clearly knew she was going to end it, but let you keep spending money on the wedding. That's bad faith. We can argue for emotional damages based on the deception and financial harm. What are we talking about in terms of damages? The return of the ring is a given. For the emotional damages, we'll ask for $15,000, enough to cover your actual losses plus compensation for the emotional toll. The judge might award less, but it's a reasonable starting point." We filed the lawsuit the following week. The filing detailed everything: the value of the ring, the timeline of our relationship, her sudden decision to end the engagement, her refusal to return the ring, and the financial damages I'd suffered due to her deception. The lawsuit was served to her at her apartment. According to the process server, she was in shock when she opened the door and saw the papers. Apparently, she thought I'd just let it go. She was wrong. The backlash was immediate. Within hours, I was getting a flood of messages from her and her friends. From Caroline, "I can't believe you're suing me. This is insane. You're being vindictive and cruel." From her best friend, Mallory, "Wow, real mature. She dodged a bullet. No wonder she left you." From her mother, "My daughter is heartbroken, and you're making it worse. Shame on you." I didn't respond to any of them. From this point on, everything would go through the lawyers. That's how you protect yourself. You stop engaging emotionally and start operating strategically. Victor advised me to document every attempt at contact. They're going to try to paint you as the villain. Let them. It will only help our case when we show the judge that you remained professional while they harassed you. The harassment continued for days. Caroline's friends were relentless on social media, posting vague things about toxic men who can't handle rejection and guys who think they own women. They never mentioned me by name, but everyone in our social circle knew who they were talking about. Mallory posted a long Instagram story about supporting women who escape controlling relationships. She included a list of red flags that were clearly meant to describe me. Controls finances, makes all the decisions, isolates partner from friends. The irony was thick, considering I'd always encouraged Caroline to maintain her friendships and never questioned how she spent her own money. Another friend, Taryn, shared an article about financial abuse in relationships with the caption, "Some men use money as a weapon." The comments were full of people agreeing how disgusting it was for men to punish women for their choices. A friend of Caroline's from college even created a poll: "If someone gives you a gift, is it yours to keep?" with options like, "Obviously," and "Only controlling people ask for gifts back." The result was 87% in favor of keeping the gifts, which just proved that most people don't understand the law of conditional gifts. The worst part was how quickly mutual friends took her side without hearing my story. People I'd known for years were suddenly treating me like a villain based solely on Caroline's version of events. My friend Grant sent me screenshots from a group chat I wasn't in, where they were talking about how psycho I was being. Someone wrote, "Imagine suing someone you supposedly loved over a piece of jewelry." Another said, "This is why I don't trust guys with money." No one seemed to care that she'd hidden her true feelings for months, while I spent thousands on a wedding she never wanted. No one seemed to think that was the real betrayal in this story. "Perfect," Victor said when I showed him. "Let them talk. I've got the receipts." Caroline hired a lawyer, a guy recommended by a friend of her father's. His legal strategy became clear when we received his response to the lawsuit. He claimed the ring was an unconditional gift and that I was trying to punish her for exercising her right to change her mind. Her lawyer argued that engagement rings in Tennessee were subject to interpretation, that she had acted in good faith by being honest about her feelings, and that my claim for emotional damages was frivolous and vengeful. Victor just smiled when he read it. They're going to lose. Tennessee case law is crystal clear on conditional gifts, and their argument that she acted in good faith is directly contradicted by the timeline. She admitted to feeling this way for months while letting you spend money on the wedding. The court date was set for October. Ironically, the same month we were supposed to get married. Instead of exchanging vows, we'd be exchanging legal arguments in front of a judge. The weeks leading up to the trial were surprisingly calm for me. I focused on work, took on a big custom dining room commission that kept me busy, and avoided any places where I might run into Caroline or her friends. My life was actually more peaceful without her. No drama, no wedding stress, just work and quiet nights at home. My friends were incredibly supportive. Grant came over most weekends, and we'd work in my shop together. He was learning woodworking as a hobby, and teaching him basic techniques helped keep my mind off the legal stuff. Did she really think she could just keep a $12,000 ring? He asked one Saturday while sanding a table leg. Apparently, some people have no shame. The day of the trial arrived. I wore a suit, one I'd actually bought for the wedding but never got to wear. Victor met me outside the courthouse, a binder full of documentation under his arm. Remember, stay calm and professional, he advised. The judge will ask you direct questions. Answer honestly. Don't exaggerate, and let the evidence speak for itself. We went inside the courtroom. Caroline was already there with her lawyer, sitting at the opposite table. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her phone. When she saw me, she quickly looked away. The judge entered, an older woman, probably in her 60s, with an expression that said she'd seen every kind of human nonsense and had no patience for any of it. Civil case number 2023, A. 4782. Plaintiff versus defendant, regarding the return of an engagement ring and damages for emotional distress. Counsel, present your cases. Victor stood up first, methodically laying out the timeline. Our relationship, the proposal, the expensive ring, the wedding planning, the deposits paid, and finally, Caroline's decision to end the engagement and her refusal to return the ring. Your Honor, Tennessee law is clear. Engagement rings are conditional gifts. The condition, marriage, was not met due to the defendant's decision to break the engagement. Therefore, she is legally obligated to return the ring, he said, holding up the documentation. Furthermore, the plaintiff has suffered significant financial damages due to the defendant's bad faith actions. She admitted to having doubts for months, but allowed the plaintiff to continue spending money on wedding preparations. This deception resulted in $12,700 of non-refundable expenses. We are requesting the return of the ring plus $15,000 for emotional damages and financial harm. Caroline's lawyer stood up, trying to play the sympathy card. Your Honor, my client is a young woman who realized she was not ready for marriage. She acted with courage by being honest about her feelings rather than going through with a wedding that would have been a mistake. The plaintiff is attempting to punish her for exercising her fundamental right to change her mind about a life-altering commitment. Apparently, Caroline had worn the ring to court. This ring represents a gift, freely given. My client treasures it as a symbol of a relationship that was meaningful to her, even if it didn't ultimately lead to marriage. Forcing her to return it would be cruel and vengeful. The judge listened without any expression. Then she looked at Caroline. Miss Patterson, when did you begin to have doubts about the marriage? Caroline stood up uncomfortably. Probably around May or June. And when did you inform the plaintiff of these doubts? I told him at the end of July. So, for 2 months, between May and July, the plaintiff continued to make financial commitments for the wedding? I guess so. You guess, or you know he did? Yes. Did you at any point during those 2 months suggest postponing the wedding or express your concerns before he made these financial commitments? Caroline hesitated. No, Your Honor. The judge made a note. When you ended the engagement, the plaintiff asked you to return the ring? Yes. And you refused? Yes, because it was a gift to me. The judge glanced at the ring, then back at Caroline. Miss Patterson, did you research the legal status of engagement rings before you ended the engagement? Caroline's face turned red. I looked up some information, yes. So, you knew the plaintiff would likely want the ring back, and you researched whether you would be legally obligated to return it before you ended the engagement? I just wanted to know my rights. Your rights, or your options for keeping an expensive piece of jewelry while ending the relationship. Caroline's lawyer interjected. Your Honor, my client was simply trying to be informed. Counsel, I'm the one asking the questions here. The judge turned back to Caroline. You admit you had doubts for months. You did not communicate them. You allowed your fiancé to continue spending money on a wedding you were planning to call off. You researched the legal status of the ring, and then you kept it when you ended the relationship. Is that correct? When you put it like that, I'm putting it as the evidence shows it happened. Is my summary of the facts correct? I didn't mean to hurt him. That's not what I asked. Is my summary of the facts correct? Yes, Caroline said quietly. The judge watched her for a long moment, then turned to Victor. Counsel, show me the receipts for the wedding deposits. Victor handed over the binder. The judge flipped through it, page by page. Venue contract with deposit receipt. Catering invoice. Photographer agreement. Honeymoon booking confirmation. All were dated between May and July. During the months, Caroline admitted to having doubts. $12,700 in non-refundable deposits, the judge noted. All paid for by the plaintiff. Did the defendant contribute financially to these expenses? Minimally, Your Honor, Victor replied. Her family covered the rehearsal dinner and her dress. Everything else was the plaintiff's responsibility. The judge set the binder down on her bench. Here's what I see. A man who was planning a future with someone he loved. A woman who lost interest but remained silent while he spent thousands of dollars on that future. Then she ended the relationship and tried to keep an expensive ring in the process. She looked at Caroline. Does that sound about right? Your Honor, I was confused and I didn't know how to handle it. You were confused, which is why you researched whether you could legally keep the ring before you broke up with your fiancé. That doesn't sound like confusion. That sounds like calculation. Caroline's lawyer tried to step in again. Your Honor, with all due respect, my client's emotional state. Counsel, I've been on this bench for 23 years. I've seen every version of this case. A young woman gets an expensive ring, changes her mind, and wants to keep the jewelry. I understand the emotional complexity of ending an engagement. What I don't understand is the lack of basic honesty and decency. She looked back at Caroline. You're 26 years old. You want to be treated like an adult capable of making her own decisions. Fine. Adults face the consequences of their decisions. You decided to end the engagement. You decided to keep the ring. Now you face the legal consequences of those decisions. The judge reviewed her notes one last time, then delivered her ruling. Regarding the engagement ring, Tennessee law is unequivocal. Engagement rings are conditional gifts, the condition being marriage. When the engagement is broken by the recipient's choice, the ring must be returned to the donor. Ms. Patterson, you are ordered to return the engagement ring to the plaintiff immediately. Caroline's face crumpled. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she shook her head. The judge continued. Regarding emotional damages, the plaintiff has demonstrated that the defendant acted in bad faith. She concealed her doubts for months while allowing him to incur substantial financial obligations under the false premise that the engagement was proceeding toward marriage. This constitutes deceptive behavior that caused measurable harm. She paused. The plaintiff is requesting $15,000 in damages, based on the documented financial losses of $12,700, plus the emotional toll caused by the defendant's bad faith conduct. I am awarding the plaintiff $13,000 in compensatory damages. This figure covers his actual losses plus a moderate amount for the emotional distress caused by the defendant's actions. She looked at Caroline. Ms. Patterson, you are ordered to pay the plaintiff $13,000 within 60 days. Failure to do so will result in wage garnishment. Furthermore, you will immediately surrender the engagement ring to the bailiff, who will return it to the plaintiff before you leave this courtroom. Your Honor, please, Caroline started to say. The ring. Now. Caroline slowly twisted the ring off her finger, tears streaming down her face. The bailiff walked over, and she placed it in his hand, as if she were giving up a piece of her soul. The bailiff brought it to the judge, who examined it briefly before handing it to Victor. Mr. Victor, confirm this is the ring in question. Victor looked at it, then at me. I nodded. Confirmed, Your Honor. Then this matter is concluded. The ring is returned to the plaintiff, and Ms. Patterson has 60 days to pay the awarded damages. Case dismissed. The gavel struck, and just like that, it was over. Caroline sat there, crying, as her lawyer packed his briefcase, visibly frustrated. I stood up, took the ring from Victor, and slipped it into my pocket. It felt heavier than I remembered, probably because of everything it now represented. Not love and promises, but deceit and consequences. As we walked out of the courtroom, I could hear Caroline's sobs echoing behind us. Her mother had shown up and was comforting her in the hallway. I kept walking and didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, Victor clapped me on the shoulder. That went better than expected. The judge saw right through their story. And the $13,000, she'll pay. When the threat of wage garnishment is on the table, they always pay. Her dad will probably help her, but one way or another, you'll get your money. We shook hands, and I walked to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes, processing it all. 2 years of my life had led to this moment, sitting in a courthouse parking lot with an engagement ring in my pocket and a legal judgment in my favor. It wasn't how I'd imagined it would end, but it was definitely over on my terms. The fallout was predictable. Caroline's friends blew up on social media, painting me as a monster who forced her to return the ring and sued her for revenge. They conveniently left out the part where she'd led me on for months while I paid for a wedding she never intended to have. Mallory posted, "Some men really can't handle rejection without turning it into revenge. Disgusting behavior." Another friend commented, "Taking someone to court over a ring. That's sociopath energy." She dodged a bullet. I didn't respond. Let them talk. The judge had seen the evidence and made her ruling. That was the only validation I needed. The check arrived 6 weeks later, not from Caroline directly, but from her father. There was a short note attached. "This settles the debt my daughter has with you. Please consider this matter fully resolved and do not contact our family again." Fine by me. I had no interest in further contact either. I deposited the check and felt a sense of closure. The money covered my losses, and then some. The ring went into my safe. I'd sell it eventually, but not yet. For now, it was proof that standing up for yourself and refusing to be taken advantage of actually works. My life improved drastically once the dust settled. The house felt lighter without Caroline's presence. I could focus on my work without the constant stress of wedding planning and relationship maintenance. The custom dining room I was building turned out spectacularly. The clients were so happy they recommended me to 3 other people. Suddenly, I had a waiting list for commissions. Business was better than ever. Grant and I started a Thursday night tradition, working in the shop together, ordering takeout, and just decompressing from the week. No drama, no complications, just friendship and productivity. "You seem different," he observed one night as he was helping me varnish a bookshelf. "More relaxed. I feel different. Like I can breathe again." That's what happens when you cut toxic people out of your life. He wasn't wrong. Caroline had been demanding in ways I hadn't fully recognized when we were together. The constant need for attention, the subtle digs about my lifestyle being boring, the constant pressure to spend more money on things I didn't care about. Without all that noise, I could just exist. About 4 months after the trial, I ran into Caroline at a coffee shop downtown. She was with some guy I didn't recognize, younger, dressed like he was trying too hard, talking loudly about some startup idea. She saw me and went pale. I just gave her a polite nod and went to order my coffee. When I turned around, she was standing next to me. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "I don't think that's a good idea. Please, just 5 minutes." I looked her over. She'd lost weight, and not in a healthy way. She had dark circles under her eyes and looked drained. 5 minutes, I agreed. We sat at a corner table. Her new guy was watching us from across the shop, trying to look casual but clearly curious. "I wanted to apologize," she began. "For everything. The way I handled the breakup was wrong. Keeping the ring was wrong. I was selfish and immature, and you didn't deserve any of it. I've been thinking about it a lot, especially after the trial. What the judge said. It hit me hard. I was calculated. I did lead you on, and I'm sorry." I studied her face. She seemed sincere, but it didn't matter anymore. Apologies don't undo damage. They just acknowledge it happened. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied, "but it doesn't change anything." "I know. I just wanted you to know that I realize I was wrong. Completely wrong." Noted. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she asked, "Are you doing okay?" "I'm great, actually. Business is good. Life is simple. I can't complain." She nodded, looking down at her ringless hands. She probably couldn't afford another one. Or maybe she'd learned her lesson about accepting expensive jewelry when you have no intention of honoring the commitment. "I heard you sold the ring," she said. "Not yet. I kept it as a reminder." "Of what?" "That I can trust my gut, protect myself, and not let people take advantage of me." She flinched a little, but nodded. Fair enough. Her new guy was getting antsy, gesturing for her to wrap it up. "I should go," she said, standing. "Take care, Caroline." She walked away, and I watched her rejoin the guy who probably had no idea what he was getting into. Maybe he'd find out. Maybe he wouldn't. Not my problem anymore. I finished my coffee and walked back to my truck. The encounter didn't rattle me like I thought it would. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew. I'd made the right decision to fight for what was mine and to refuse to be the nice guy who just absorbs the loss to avoid conflict. Today, my life is exactly how I want it. The shop is thriving. I'm working on projects I genuinely care about, and there is zero drama. I date casually, but I haven't met anyone I want to get serious with, and that's okay. I learned the hard way that rushing into a commitment with someone who isn't all in is a recipe for disaster. The ring eventually sold for $9,800. It lost some value, but that's how jewelry goes. I put the money into the business account and used it to upgrade my equipment. Every time I use that new table saw, I think about how it came from refusing to be a doormat. Recently, Grant asked me if I'd ever get engaged again. Someday, I said, but next time, I'll know what warning signs to look for. And I'll definitely have a much clearer conversation about expectations before I drop $12,000 on a ring. He laughed. Lesson learned. An expensive lesson. But yeah, sometimes you have to lose money to gain wisdom. That's deep. That's reality. The whole experience taught me something valuable. Standing up for yourself isn't being vindictive or petty. It's necessary. When someone wrongs you, especially financially, you have every right to seek justice through the proper channels. The court system exists for exactly these kinds of situations. Comment. What an incredible journey this story takes us on. It truly highlights how crucial it is to protect your own peace. Sometimes, the kindest action you can take is for yourself by standing firm on your values. Setting a boundary is not an act of aggression. It is an act of self-respect. We all have a responsibility to be honest, both with others and with ourselves, about what we truly want. True healing often begins when we stop seeking validation from others and start building a life that feels right to us. The goal is not to win every argument, but to build a life where you do not have to fight for your own happiness. You can be a kind and generous person without allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. I hope this reminds you of your own strength and the importance of creating a life filled with honesty and mutual respect. Remember that true closure comes from within, not from anyone else's apology. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.